Alright guys, today we are learning about nouns, pronouns, and case. So this should be a pretty straightforward lesson. Nouns and pronouns are not too difficult. And pronoun case, once you get the hang of it, is really not bad either. So a noun, a person, place, thing, or idea, and I know I discussed this briefly in the overview, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about different types of nouns today, give you a few more examples. A boy is what we call a common noun, and that represents a person, obviously. Whereas the name Grayson, when you use someone's name, that's called a proper noun. And you don't need to know the difference between common and proper nouns, just know that they're both nouns. Other objects like desk is a noun, city is a place, also the proper noun like Atlanta, or New York, or a country, or a continent even like Europe. Those are all considered nouns. Probably the most difficult nouns to identify are idea nouns. We call those abstract nouns. And that would be a word like enthusiasm. It's not something that you can touch or taste or see or hear. It represents a concept. And the other difficult things about abstract nouns, these idea nouns, is that they often can be used as other parts of speech. For example, the word fear. Fear is an idea noun. It is a concept. However, in a sentence like this, Grayson fears snakes. The word fear is used as a verb. It's an action, all right? That's the verb in the sentence. However, in this sentence, Grayson has a fear of snakes. Fear is used as a noun. And so just really pay attention to, and I'll say this over and over again when I'm talking about parts of speech, is the function of the word. And a neat clue for you to watch out for when looking for these abstract nouns are the words a, an, and the. Those are called articles. They're a type of adjective. But the word a, an, and the will always precede a noun, okay? So, and if you think about it, that makes sense. That's just how we discuss objects. I have a book. Have you gone to the store? So, just a little clue for you to tuck away in your brain. If you feel like, oh, I'm not sure if this word is a noun or not, look for an article. Look for a, an, or the, and that will always come, maybe not immediately before a noun, but it will always precede. It will often precede a noun. So that may help you out a little bit in identifying nouns. But typically students do well with nouns. Pretty easy to identify. Pronouns. A pronoun takes the place of a noun. And there are lots of different types of pronouns. The most common that we think of are personal pronouns like you and I and he and she and they, it, all of that. Relative pronouns are words like who or which or that. We also have what we call reflexive pronouns, which is kind of those words that end with self or selves. And that is, you only use a reflexive pronoun when the subject is acting upon itself. I gave myself a pat on the back, or they gave themselves a round of applause, that kind of thing. And then finally, I just want to go ahead and mention what we call indefinite pronouns. And these are words like anyone, everybody, all, each. So they represent a person or people, but we use the word indefinite because we're not sure. They could represent any person or any group of people. So hence the term indefinite. Now let me tell you guys, you don't have to memorize this list. You don't have to know the difference between personal and relative and reflexive and indefinite pronouns. You just need to be able to recognize all of these words as pronouns. And I just like to show you the categories and give you examples from each one. Another concept you should know related to pronouns is that the word that a pronoun refers back to, all right, every pronoun or most pronouns have an antecedent. So like in this sentence, Sally accidentally dropped chocolate on the floor, but she ate it anyway. So the pronoun in the sentence is the word she, and she is referring back to Sally. So instead of repeating her name twice, we use the pronoun just to make the sentence flow better. And so Sally is the antecedent to the pronoun she. And later in the semester, we'll talk about pronoun and antecedent agreement and how those two words have to go together in number and in case and so on and so forth. So I just kind of wanted to pave the way for that a little bit as you think about pronouns. And then one final note before we move on to pronoun case, and that is that sometimes pronouns can function as other parts of speech. For example, probably the most common exception I want you to note is that possessive pronouns often function as adjectives. So, here, please wash my car tomorrow. So you see the word my and you think, oh, that's a pronoun. However, in this sentence, it's functioning as an adjective because it's modifying the noun car, my car. And that is really typical in the use of possessive pronouns. And when we talk about adjectives, I'll give you some more examples. But I just wanted you to, again, like I said with the nouns, it's all about the function of the word. You can't just memorize lists of words and say, these are all the pronouns and these are all the nouns. You have to understand the differences in how they function in sentences. And that's how you are going to be able to identify them as different parts of speech and do well on your grammar quizzes and tests and so forth. All right, let's talk about pronoun case. So don't let this intimidate you. I know when I was a student and I saw a chart in a grammar handbook, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to memorize this. And you really don't. Pronouns use different forms in different cases. And all that really means is the pronoun being used as the subject of the sentence, or is it an object in the sentence? Is it a direct object, an indirect object, object of a preposition? We also have the possessive case. A pronoun may be used to show possession. And honestly, guys, for the most part, you will get pronoun case right every time because you speak English, right? You know, for example, if you're saying a sentence like, I am going to the store, you would never say, me am going to the store. You speak English. You know how to use I instead of me in the subject of the sentence. However, there are a couple instances where pronoun case can be a little tricky. And so that's why I did want to discuss this with you. And really, I'm going to give you the rules about when to use subjective case, when to use objective case. And I don't expect you to memorize this chart or memorize all the rules, but this will just help you figure out how to understand pronoun case, especially in those more tricky instances. And we'll talk about that. So let's start with discussing when to use subjective case. First and most obviously, when the pronoun is the subject of the clause or sentence, you're going to use subjective case. So, in a sentence like this, he ran away from home. You would never say, him ran away from home, because that doesn't sound right, and you know that because you speak English. However, it can get more tricky when you have a compound subject, all right? And this is often where students get mixed up. So Max and I have been looking for him all day, all right? When you have that other person and yourself, it often gets confusing. And sometimes people think the I is always the correct one, but it's not always. It is in this case because it's the subject of the clause. So you would say, I have been looking for him all day. And whenever you have a compound subject or a compound object, and all that compound means is that another person and yourself, the best way to figure it out is just to take that other person out of the equation. So if you covered that up with your fingers, the Max and, you would know it should be I because that sounds right to you. I have been looking for him all day. So that's just a little trick. Also, you would use subjective case when the pronoun is a subject complement. Now, this is unusual. We don't often have pronouns as subject complements. So the example I'm showing you, it is she who is responsible for this mix-up. And that actually may remind you, maybe you've heard your mom or your dad answer the phone, and you can tell the other person asked for them because your mom said, this is she, and that might sound a little odd to you, but it's actually grammatically correct. It is she. We have the linking verb. The pronoun is the subject complement, so it should stay in the subjective case. Or like if you've watched maybe some of the old like Zorro movies or old movies with some sort of gallant hero, and he'll show up and say, "It is I, who am here to save the day." So that "it is I" is actually correct, even though it sounds weird to us. But that doesn't show up very often, but you do need to be aware of it. The next rule for when to use subjective case is when the pronoun is in a positive to the subject. Now, we haven't talked about appositives yet. I bet you recognize that word even if you can't remember what it is. All an appositive is, it's something that comes after a word and renames it. So, for example, 2 teachers, Dr. Thompson and I, will be in the Writing Center. And again, whenever you have this compound subject here, Dr. Thompson and I, you can just take out those other words and you'll be able to hear that it's correct to use I. I will be in the Writing Center. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So those are the rules for subjective case. When do you use objective case? When the pronoun is the direct object or indirect object. So the teacher gave them some extra credit. And again, you recognize that. You would never say the teacher gave they some extra credit. That doesn't sound right at all. Here we have the word them as an indirect object. But sometimes it can be a little trickier. And this is where I see the most mistakes in student writing. Will you please send Dave and me to the store? Somehow people have it in their heads that whenever you have so-and-so and myself, that you always use the pronoun I. You don't always use the pronoun I. It just depends on whether it's subjective or objective. Now, remember our trick. If you take the words Dave and out of this sentence, will you please send me to the store? It sounds right to you. You would not say, will you please send I to the store? No, you understand, your ear can hear that that's incorrect. So you can use that trick anytime there's another person's name and a personal pronoun. Also, when the pronoun is the object of a preposition, so I think you should go with her to the prom. A cab is coming for Belle and them later. A cab is coming for them later. So her and them, both objects of a preposition, so you use the objective case. And usually that's going to sound right to you. When do you use possessive case? This one's pretty easy. When a pronoun indicates possession. So when you're using, this is my dog. She's not very obedient. You would never say, this is me dog. That just sounds weird unless maybe you're British. But we know how to use possessive pronouns pretty well. That red car parked in the corner is mine. Just another example for you. The only tricky thing that can come up with possessive pronouns is when we use them with what's called a gerund, which is just an ing verb, all right, like swimming or running or jumping, what have you. So when you have a pronoun appearing before a gerund, you use the possessive case, which might look a little odd to you. I believe my working with Bill has improved his grades. So the gerund here is the word working, all right? And you use the my because it is possessive, right? My working with Bill has improved his grades. And so that's just the appropriate way to use your pronouns here. I can understand his practicing long hours. So, and your book has some more examples of that if that seems a little odd to you, and it has even more detailed explanation of the differentiation between using possessive pronoun and just using a regular subjective or objective pronoun. So you can check that out in your book for further explanation if you need to. And then finally, probably the trickiest thing that students struggle with pronoun case is who versus whom, especially since we don't use words like whom very often in our conversation. However, in your writing, you need to be able to use who and whom correctly. So, lest you be scared, there's a very easy trick to deciding on the correct option of whether to use who or whom. because who is subjective, you can simply replace it with another subjective pronoun, such as he. That's what I always say, who is he and whom is him. All right? So let me kind of explain a little more by using examples of what I mean by replacing who with he and whom with him. So if you're looking at a test question like this, who or whom deserves the extra bonus this year? And you're like, oh, I don't know. I never use the word whom, so I can't tell which one is right just by looking at this. So what you're going to do is you're going to rewrite this, especially if it's a question. You'll rewrite it as a sentence, okay, as a statement, and use either he or him. So what we would do here is we would say he deserves the extra bonus this year. You wouldn't say him deserves the extra bonus. You would say he. And because he sounds right, that means that the correct answer is who. Who deserves the extra bonus this year? Another example. Who or whom should we recommend for the promotion? Oh, I don't know who or whom. It's hard for me to tell. So you have to rewrite it so you can insert either he or him. So with this one, you have to rearrange it a little bit more. We recommend, would you say we recommend he or we recommend him for the promotion? You would say we should recommend him for the promotion. And because you chose the pronoun him, that's the one that is correct. That means the correct answer is whom. Whom should we recommend for the promotion? And this trick works anytime you have to choose between who and whom. You can insert he and him, he or him, and be able to choose correctly. And to me, that's easy to remember, especially since both whom and him end with that same letter M. That just makes sense. That sticks in my mind. So I hope that's helpful to you in figuring out the difference between who and whom. And this is when you take the pronoun case quiz, you'll be looking at sentences and you'll have to choose which is the correct pronoun. Is it Sam and I or Sam and me? Is it who or whom? Is it they or them? That's the appropriate pronoun to use in that sentence. So that's what that's going to look like on quiz and test questions. And I'll have some practice posted for you, like a practice quiz or worksheet posted for you in the practice folder soon. So I hope this makes sense to y'all, and good luck with pronoun case.